My best friend told me an incredible story about her husband, and she knew I wouldn't believe it. I don't like who I am because of it. This story isn't particularly pleasant. Given the circumstances, my best friend, who is 34 years old and female, has been married for 3 years. I thought about how happy I was. She said it was a happy situation. He was always really quiet. Even though he was quite a bit older, he seemed really nice and loving. The only significant issue she ever discussed was their differing views on having children. It was something she'd mentioned before, how she'd been really firm from the start that she didn't want any. And while that made him sad, he said she was worth giving that up for since he had nieces and nephews. But the issue never really went away. She still brought it up from time to time. In a casual way, she'd say things like, "Oh, he's trying to bring up the kid thing again," or, "I don't know why he does that." She'd also say things like, "Oh, he said that he thinks he can change my mind." But then when she told him he couldn't, he backed off. I wasn't thrilled about that information, but it wasn't a major issue. She didn't seem overly concerned about it. We also see each other at least twice a week, usually at my house or out to eat since her husband works from home. We text all the time and call regularly, so we're very in touch with each other. So we go from a normal life to her suddenly showing up at my door at 3 a.m. in tears. She was inconsolable and couldn't talk at all. The only thing she could manage was to scream, "No," at me when I went to call her husband. I thought she had been mugged or assaulted on the street, but I didn't know. Long story short, that night my boyfriend carried her to the guest room, and I slept with her and held her all night. The next day, she was still pretty shaken up, and we realized her car wasn't there. So that meant she had to walk 4 miles in 30-degree weather to get to our house. But she can talk, and she tells me the craziest story I've ever heard. Her husband came home drunk, or at least that's what she thought, and started another fight with her over the kids. He started throwing things and just screaming at her about how he was ruining his life and legacy. Then he went into their room and said he was going to make things even. He started breaking things, including some of hers. He even tore open her jewelry box and started ripping her clothes apart in the closet. And when she tried to stop him, he pushed her hard enough to knock her to the floor. Then he said he didn't have to make things even and that she should just be a good wife. Then he did what I think he did while she was on the floor. He left her in tears. She said that he then took her keys and phone and locked himself in the bathroom, screaming that he would kill himself if she ever left him. That didn't stop her. Despite everything, she still went to leave. They have a very heavy front door that you can hear from a distance, so he must have heard her leave while he was in the bathroom. She said he chased her down the street, half-dressed. He caught up with her and hit her a few times, but she managed to get away and he stopped following. She made it to my house and started to cry. That's the end of the story. This was a pretty intense moment. I had always thought of them as a happy and loving couple, so I was really taken aback. I was pretty shocked. That was my immediate reaction. It wasn't like, "Oh, she's lying." But it was this immediate reaction that this couldn't be true. I don't think he'd do that. I didn't say anything, but I think she could tell from my face that I didn't believe her. Or maybe she was just feeling particularly emotional. I'm not sure. But she started crying again, really hard, and kept saying, "He said this would happen. He said this would happen." It took a little while for her to calm down, and I told her repeatedly that I did believe her. I was just taken aback. She said he told her that no one would believe her, that he'd been telling her that for years. He'd been doing this for years, and she'd been protecting him for years because she thought he had a problem. I didn't believe her, even though I knew she was telling the truth. I just managed to hide it better this time and at least made sure she felt safe. Then she showed me the bruises. They were all on her thighs and stomach, which you can't see. She told me that he did this at least 3 times a week. She said he always used alcohol issues as an excuse, but she couldn't even smell it on him anymore. That night was the last straw for me. That's when I realized it was true. I had that gut reaction, but it disappeared. But why did it take her showing me that to make her believe her? I've known her for about 10 years. She was a great support to me during my own divorce. And she's always been such a lovely person. She isn't out to get revenge either. I was already aware of all this, but my gut reaction was to stick up for a man I barely know, just because he was always nice to me. It's left a very bad impression on me. We're currently making progress on the project. We're working on getting a restraining order. She's staying with us. And my amazing boyfriend went to their house to get her remaining belongings. There wasn't much left, but at least she has her phone and car. The soon-to-be ex is trying non-stop to get in touch with her, but I'd rather do anything than let him go near her. I've had to call the police twice in the last 2 weeks because he showed up here freaking out. Her job has let her work from home because he tried to see her there. You would think that would be more than enough for an order, but that's a whole other thing. My friend is really handling this well. After her first few outbursts, she's handling this situation pretty well. I think she should be allowed to have more meltdowns, but she's too resilient for that. There's a lot to talk about, and a lot for her to work through. We're here for her as she goes through this process. I'm processing a lot right now. I've only discussed this with my boyfriend, as he's aware of the situation. I know I'm doing everything right in terms of what she needs and wants. I'm being a good friend, and I know it's true when he says that. But if I were truly a good friend, why didn't I immediately believe her? I understand that it's a minor detail, and I realize that I recovered from the initial shock very quickly. But that was still 5 minutes where she was truly alone, where he was right and no one would believe her. It makes me feel sick. I'm not trying to make her take her frustration out on me. But why did I have that reaction first? At that moment, she was crying because she knew I didn't trust her. I did that. Why did it take my best friend showing me proof to convince me? What's going on with me? I wonder why I didn't notice first. How could I let her go through this? I'm not sure. I keep thinking about it. Though, has anyone else had a similar experience? Am I the only one who thinks this way? I should also mention that I didn't show her this post, but I did ask if I could get some thoughts out about this on Reddit. It's a bit strange, but she's aware that I occasionally vent and interact with random accounts on this platform. On top of that, she's in a position where she's no longer concealing anything. I'm extremely proud of her. She wants the world to know what he did and who he is. I just wanted to bring that up. I don't want her to see it directly, but she was aware of it anyway. She knew from my expression, and she's just too good of a person to be upset. And that's all for now. To sum up, this anonymous story isn't trying to invade my friend's privacy.